Hey guys, welcome to Coding with Kyle. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next feature, and this one is Charlie's feature. And Charlie is working on an attack feature. The feature lets the player hurt or bring the HP. Okay, so yeah, it brings the HP of the enemy down, or the player can get hurt. Identify the enemy, pull out the weapon, swing the weapon with spacebar, hurt the enemy. Okay, so this attacking feature is very similar to the fireball attack. It's also very similar to there's some other attacking features we have. Let's see which ones I posted so far. So there's the 4 action controls. Those are attacks. There's a charge attack. So there's a couple of attacks. So we're gonna not worry about doing another attack. And I would say watch one of the other attack videos, and if you have questions, we'll go ahead and answer those. All right, so let's go to another feature. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Add a feature to your game. Okay. Emery, let's see what Emery's feature is. Poking. Character pops balloons with a needle. Where does the feature go? She thinks the background. And what does your feature need to do? Start, fly, and poke balloons. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and do the poking feature. So another balloon type game. So let's go ahead and just code this. We have our player sprite. We need to create balloons to poke. So there's a balloon. And we're going to need to add some stuff to our costume. So our player's costume, let's do this, and then I'm just going to add, oh, you know what, actually there's a very good costume for this. So we're going to add a costume down here. And this is adding another costume in our cat. This is going to be our poke animation. So it adds this. This will be our poke. And this one is going to be our main costume. So we have our main and our poke. And we're going to go ahead and draw, I'm just going to draw like a little black, and it's going to try to be like a needle to poke. My drawing skills aren't the best, but it's just going to be like a little poke. There we go. You can spend more time drawing, but that's going to be our attack animation. So okay, so let's go back to this. What do we need to do? So we want to start the game. We want to fly around and then poke balloons, which means that we're going to need a lot of balloons to spawn. And we need a stage. So let's go to backdrops. Let's get rid of this boring stage, or I guess we'll add a new one first. If we're popping balloons, we probably want to be in the sky. Maybe there's different levels. I kind of like the slopes one. All right, so we'll use slopes, and maybe this could be like a harder level because there's like rain and, well, is that rain? Maybe it's just wind. Oh, wind. Ooh, the balloons move faster. Okay, so we're just gonna say we'll just call it level 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and start, and let's get rid of the night mode on my computer because that does not make for a good recording. Come on, computer. Yes, I want the nightlight, and we want to turn off the nightlight. There we go. There we go. Okay. Okay, so our player. We're going to start. So we start off with the backdrop. We're going to go to events, and the green flag clicked is how we start a game. So yeah, we'll do that. All right, so the player needs to be able to move around. So let's use the 4 keys, W, A, S, and D. Or yeah. All right, so left is A, right is D. You could also use the arrow keys too. We need to find W, and then here is S. Cool. Then we also want another one when the space key is pressed, and that's how we're going to switch to pop the balloon. We also need when a green flag is pressed. So when the green flag is pressed, we're going to start our program, and we need to start off with our costume. So we're going to switch our costume to our main costume. So the green flag is pressed. Now we're back to our main cat guy. And to fly around, we're going to use WASD. So we're going to use the motion. We're going to change X and Y by, but maybe we can do glide. Glide 1 sec. Okay, we're just going to do the change X by and change Y by, because gliding is going to be a little bit different. All right, so W up, S is going to be negative, and maybe we make this a little bit more since we're gliding around a bunch. Okay, so negative 20, because A is going left, so it needs to go negative, and D is positive. Make sure as well that we want to change stop the script, and we want to make sure that all of our code blocks have a nice beginning and end to them. So all right, so we can move our character around. That's going to help us fly. And we're going to do the space key to pop. So whenever the space key is pressed, we're going to switch our costume to poke. And now we're going to try to poke the balloon. And so we click space and we switch the costume to poke the balloon. We need to check if we're touching a balloon. So to check if we're doing something, we need an if statement. And we're going to use the if, then, and else. So if we are touching a balloon, then we want to pop it. So if we're touching a balloon, I think the balloon, each balloon is actually going to have to sense if it's touched. We're just going to hit space to do poke. Yeah, we're just going to do poke. And we're going to broadcast a message that says pop. So we're attempting to pop. And we want to stop this script. And maybe also, so that way people can't just spam spacebar, maybe we could have a little bit of a cooldown. So a second cooldown before you can try poking and popping again. Okay, so now we have that. We hit space, and we need our costume to go back after the poke. So we poke, and let's say that the poke is going to happen for 0.5 seconds, and then we switch our costume back to the main costume, and then we wait another second until we're allowed to poke again. Okay. You'll have to add, and this will be part of a different feature, the poke feature, but you'll need to make sure that we put this on a cooldown, which is described in some of the other videos, like the charge attack. But that's a different feature, how to add cooldowns. All right, so now the balloon, whenever the green flag is pressed, the balloon needs to start making a bunch of clones of itself in order to start moving around. So what's going to happen is it's going to create a clone of itself immediately, and it's going to do this forever. And maybe we need to decide how long between each clone. So maybe 2 seconds between each clone, and then just keep repeating that. Whenever a clone starts as a clone, what it's going to do is it needs to keep moving around randomly. So forever, it's going to start moving around in a bunch of random directions. So glide 1 second to random position. So if we hit the green flag, we now have a bunch of balloons that are starting to spawn. And our guy can move around and we can try and pop balloons. And as you can see, we start getting a lot of balloons very quickly. And that's going to be part of the fun part of the game. So maybe, and the clone, let's, because we want things to be able to happen really fast in the beginning. So maybe the clone can also create a clone of itself. Well, that'll be, it'll glide, let's have it glide to a random position for 3 seconds. And if you haven't popped it in 3 seconds, the balloon is going to create a clone of itself again. So this is going to create a lot of clones, and this will be fun. Okay, so now while it's going through all of this, it needs to check, is it going to get popped? So we're broadcasting this message pop. So we actually need to change the broadcast message from pop. It can't be pop. So let's take that out. And the reason why is because we have to say whenever I receive pop, and we don't want to do that because whenever the clone is moving, we want this moving clone balloon to be able to tell if it's trying to be popped. So what we're actually going to need is a variable. So we're going to make a variable that says is pop. And this is a question now we're asking. Is the pop on or off? Whenever we create a variable, we always go to the backdrop and we go when the green flag is pressed, and we're going to set is pop to 0. So we're going to use is pop as a Boolean variable. Boolean is true or false, yes or no. So is pop set to 0 means false. We're not trying to pop any balloons. Is pop set to 1 means true. We are trying to pop a balloon. Okay? And we also want to hide, well, we're going to want to hide the variable, but I'm going to keep it open so that way you can see what's going on. So the variable is now, whenever you click on the spacebar, we switch the costume to poke. We're going to set is pop to 1, and that's going to signal that yes, we're trying to pop. And then after we switch the costume back to main, we're going to set is pop back to 0. So that way we're saying we're not trying to pop anymore. And now if we hit the space bar, you can see the 0 switches to a 1, and then we're able to do that. And if we spam space bar, you notice it doesn't work. So waiting 1 second at the end is a good way to do this. So now if we go to the balloon, what we can say is it glides 3 seconds, it creates a clone of myself, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to start off this forever. We're gliding well, we're going to drag this part out, and actually we're going to use an if, then, and else. So we're going to keep this part of code, and we're going to put it back in a second. But what we need to check is if the balloon is being popped. So if the balloon is being popped, 2 things have to happen. 1, we have to be hitting space and attempting to pop the balloon. And 2, we need to be touching the balloon in order to pop it. Because if we're not touching it, then how are we going to pop it? So we need to check if, let's go to sensing. So if we're touching, so this is inside the balloon. So we need to check if the balloon is touching the player. But we also need to check if is pop is 0 or 1. So we're going to go down to operators and right here, and. So there's this and one. We're going to drag that. So we're going to check if it's touching the player and if isPop is equal to a certain number. So we're going to drag this. And so this is right here is the complicated sentence in our code, where we have to drag a lot of puzzle pieces into each other. So we say, when I start as a clone, we're going to forever keep moving, and we're going to check if the balloon is touching the player and if isPop is equal to 1. So if isPop is equal to 1, that means we're trying to pop a balloon. So if a balloon is touching the player and we're trying to pop it, then what we're going to do is pop it. And it's going to pop by disappearing. So we're going to delete this clone. Else, this is what happens if this condition isn't true. So if the balloon is not touching the player and we're not trying to pop it, that means the balloon is free to move around, and we're going to go ahead and stick that glide code right back there into the else. So that's what's going to happen the rest of the time. One more thing, because we're actually pretty close to just having like a pretty decent game here. We're going to go to variables, and we're going to make a variable and type in score, and we're just going to keep score. So backdrop, we're going to set the score to 0. And then, yeah, so we already saw isPop switch back and forth. So now we want to hide isPop, and we just want people to see the score. Let's drag that back up there. All right, so the balloon. So now, before we delete this code, delete this clone, what we want to do is change the player's score by 1. And that's going to help our score get increased. So let's go back with the green flag. So we're moving around with our player, and I missed that one. So, so we have a small issue where our balloons, oh, there I popped one. Interesting. All right, so I see what's happening. We're getting a score and we're popping some, but here's the problem. It says glide 3 seconds to a random position. And then during those 3 seconds while it's gliding, it's not detecting if it's getting popped. It only checks at the beginning whenever it stopped for a second. So what we're going to have to do is have it glide. We just need to change the glide. So let's, every 0.2 seconds, it will check if a balloon needs to be popped. Okay, so that's gonna create a quad of clones really fast, which we don't want to do. Oh no! Please tell me I didn't crash it. Oh, thank goodness, we got so close. Let's have to delete this clone back. This code leaked out. All right, so we don't want that to create a clone of myself. We'll wait for this to create a clone every 1 second. And we'll just have this base balloon here. And we'll hide it. So that way no one can hit it. So we're going to hide the clone, create the clone, and the first thing we do is we're going to show the clone. So now if I hit green, now we have a bunch of balloons there. So now I should be able to pop them. There we go. So these balloons are moving very fast. So maybe we want to slow it down a little bit. So 0.2 seconds and then it glides, and it's gliding very quickly to a random spot. So they can really bounce around. So I think what we can do is this. We'll say that they glide 1 second, and then the player would need to, the pop needs to stay active for 1 second also. Okay, so let's try this again. So now our balloons are moving a little bit more of a reasonable space. We'll try to pop one. There we go. We can only pop them when they change directions, and that's part of the trick of our game, potentially. But this is how you create a bunch of balloons and get them popping, and then playing around with when they pop and things like that. Or maybe you want you could also have this guy follow your mouse pointer, include different types of enemies. Maybe there's a bad balloon that you don't want to pop, and if you pop the bad balloon, something bad happens. Maybe the game ends when there's a certain amount of balloons that are spawned. Who knows? There's a lot more to add to this, but this is a great starting point for the balloon popping. Specifically, the poking feature. So we've made the poking feature, but we also made the balloon spawning feature. So we poked the balloons, but in order for me to show that, we made a balloon spawning feature. So this is kind of a both of an enemy spawning feature and a balloon popping feature. All right. Thank you for watching.